Hey BookTube, this is Kelly. Thank you so much for watching my channel, Books I'm Not Reading. Welcome if you are new to my channel. This is the Jane Austen July video that I have been so anxious to make. Today I want to talk about two YA retellings of Jane Austen books. This is Pride by E.B. Zoboi, and it's subtitled A Pride and Prejudice Remix. And then a new book, Where the Rhythm Takes You by Sarah Doss. This is her debut novel, and this is a retelling of Jane Austen's Persuasion. So I have seen, first thing though, before I go any farther, I want you to know that not only am I going to spoil these two books, but I am also going to spoil Jane Austen's books, okay? So just take that into consideration before you watch any more. maybe wait and add it to your watch later list. I have seen a lot of conversations on this Jane Austen July about, well, like, do I want to read a retelling? Like, why don't I just read Jane Austen, right? And I understand that, but I also think that retellings can make us look at how things have changed over time since Jane Austen was writing. Maybe it can make us look at the original work slightly differently, or rethink some of the things that Jane Austen was doing in the books. And I also think it's really important for people to be able to see themselves in Jane Austen. So Pride takes place in Bushwick in Brooklyn, and our Elizabeth Bennet character, whose name is Zuri Benitez, is Haitian Dominican. And Where the Rhythm Takes You, our main character, her name is Reina, and she lives on the island of Tobago. I hope I'm saying that right, which is part of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. If you look at the Caribbean, it's more in the southern part. It's actually not too far. The island itself is not too far off the coast of Venezuela. So I think it's really important for people to be able, especially young people, to be able to see themselves in Jane Austen. And of course, I'm always hoping that some young person will read these and then go to Jane Austen, right? The other thing that I think is really important about both these characters, both the main characters in these two books, is that they are isolated. Pride takes place, like I said, in Bushwick in Brooklyn, and people who live in kind of rougher neighborhoods, and I just know this from my own personal experience in Chicago. We knew people who were members of gangs, and they had never left. They had never left their own neighborhood, even though they lived in this fantastic city in Chicago. Like they never go away, and that's true for Zuri. She's been to Times Square in Manhattan, 4 or 5 times at most. She has not seen, all of Brooklyn, which Brooklyn's quite large. But yeah, so there's places in Brooklyn that she's never been to. She tends to stay close to what she calls her hood. And Reina is on an island, so she's sort of trapped by that, but she hasn't even been on a plane to Trinidad. So I think that's something that Jane Austen would relate to, that her characters are sometimes isolated by their family's social standing. I think Anne Elliot in Persuasion is isolated maybe with her own thoughts. She's so different from the rest of her family. And certainly spending 8 years thinking about the love of your life would draw you in, right? I think in Persuasion it even says that that she's lost her bloom. So I thought that was really interesting that both these retellings are about characters who are somewhat isolated and cut off. Okay, so I'm gonna start with Pride. First of all, this is absolutely a beautiful book. I love the just kind of rococo cover with the graffiti. And then these are the end papers, which are just, I think, spectacular. And this book is actually a lot about gentrification. And I do think that that is something that Jane Austen would be writing about if she were alive today, because it is a class issue. Jane Austen novels are not just romances. They are about money. They are about, again, class issues. There's a lot more going on than just the love story. Granted, that's what draws a lot of us into it, right? So just to share a little bit about Zuri, our main character's view of her neighborhood. Our block parties bring everybody in our hood together, though. The Dominicans, Haitians, Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, people from Panama, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce that, African Americans, and white couples too, who are buying up a lot of the brownstones down the block. My neighborhood is made of love, but it's money and buildings and food and jobs that keep it alive. And even I have to admit that the new people moving in with their extra money and dreams can sometimes make things better. We'll have to figure out a way to make both sides of Bushwick work. The book opens with Zuri and her 4 sisters and her parents. They live in an apartment. And across the street is this property that for years and years has just been, it's been vacant. It's been trashy, whatever, kind of a crack house sort of feel to it. And this family, called, I think their last name is Darcy, actually. The Darcy family. They move in across the street and they renovate and rebuild this house, and it's very schwanky and fancy, and a lot of things that they're really surprised to see going into the house. So I thought that was interesting. But they are moving to Bushwick from Manhattan because, they had a small apartment in Manhattan. Obviously, no surprise, Manhattan real estate is very expensive. And so this was a way for them to have a larger space, to do more with it. And you do get the sense that the Darcy family wants to be part of the community. But the fact of their moving in is also part of this gentrification. And so later in the book, Zuri says to the landlady of the building that they live in, she says, "Those boys don't belong here, and they changed everything about this block by renovating that house," which is not true because she's already said there's white people also moving into some of the brownstones. But anyway, she goes on to say, "Poppy says the property values will go up and the taxes too. Is that true? You'll have to pay more taxes because of that nice house?" And just sort of troubled by the fact that the love interest is part of this whole gentrification. It's part of her concern. You don't read a lot of YA books. And believe me, there's plenty of teenage angst in this, okay? But you don't read a lot of YA books that talk about property taxes. And what does that mean? And so, yes, the rest of the book, there are elements of Pride and Prejudice, sort of modernized and sewn in. But it is not Pride and Prejudice. And as the ending, I was so horrified by the ending of this book, because basically what happens is Colin inherits the building that Zuri and her family live in, and he sells it to a developer, and so Zuri and her family have to leave and go to another neighborhood that's even farther out. It's the last stop on the train that is in their neighborhood. The last stop on the L, she says. And I didn't expect I didn't expect either of these books to end with a wedding. Obviously, they're about teenagers. These people are still in high school. But just the fact that would be like if Pride and Prejudice ended with the Collinses moving into Longbourn and the Bennets cast out. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, it's just so, like, and to think that the love interest in the story is part of the gentrification of the neighborhood. Like, I don't know. Like, I just had really conflicted feelings about that. I liked some of the ideas in it, and I felt like she was talking about things that I think Jane Austen would be talking about, but I'm just gonna stick with this, at least when it comes to YA, maybe. So the next book, Where the Rhythm Takes You, our heroine, Raina, aka Anne Elliot, is 17 years old. And this book, one of the things so there's a few things about this book that I really liked. So because it takes place in Tobago, there is a lot of discussion about music and about art. And there is a playlist at the back of this book called the Saka playlist, and I apologize if I'm saying all of these things wrong, but that stands for Soul of Calypso. So there's music to kind of get you into that sort of island vibe and a sense of the culture of the island itself. I thought that was really smart, especially because our Captain Wentworth comes back to the island after being gone for 2 years as a Grammy award-winning musician. And he brings his 2 bandmates with him. And they also bring the Musgrove sisters, one of whom is a supermodel and the other one is a social media influencer. And I just had to laugh so hard. So that's the character based on Louisa Musgrove. And so something happens that goes viral on the internet, and Eliza, aka Louisa, says, "Oh, I broke the first rule, which is never read the comments." It just cracked me up. It just, as somebody who really loves comments and loves the discussion that takes place in the comment section, apparently you could reach a certain point where you just don't even read the comments. So I thought that was interesting. And the other thing that's interesting is that we actually go back in time and see Raina first meeting Aiden and kind of their friendship and their romance before he goes away to pursue his music dream, and also before Raina's mother dies. And her mother and father own a sort of luxury resort hotel on the island, and Aiden comes back with his band to stay there, and it wasn't his idea. It's kind of a surprise on him. Like, I think he probably would have talked them out of it. But my biggest problem is, so it's only been 2 years. She's 17. So the last time she's seen him, she was 15. And I just don't think that compares to the situation that Anne Elliot is in Persuasion. Okay, so Anne Elliot, in Regency England, I think she's maybe 27. So she's reaching a certain age where, she might not be able to get married. And she's been separated from Captain Wentworth. She has not seen him for 8 years, which I think makes a big difference between 2 years. I think that's a long time to love someone and by sheer chance happen to see them again. I mean, she might never, if in Persuasion the Crofts hadn't rented out her family home, she wouldn't have seen him. So I thought that was a fundamental difference in the book, that at one point, one of the characters tells Raina, oh, well, it's just so easy for you. You can start your life over again. And I'm thinking, she's 17. Her life hasn't even started yet. So that was my big trouble with the book. I did like the flashback scenes, you know. I think somebody should do a retelling of Persuasion where we get to see young Anne Elliot and young Captain Wentworth like together. That would be great. But yeah, you know, just because you say you're doing a retelling and you change some names around or you include the names of characters, like there's a snarky neighbor in this whose name is Mrs. Clay. Well, that's not Mrs. Clay's role in Persuasion. She actually plays a much bigger part, but yeah, like don't just throw her in there just so you can be like, well, this is a Persuasion retelling. And the other kind of what I thought was a lost opportunity on the author's part, and I don't know exactly what happens, but when Raina first sees him, she sees the edge of a tattoo, like on the bottom of his sleeve. She sees part of a tattoo, and I think he sees her looking at it, and he kind of covers it up. And I thought it was going to be like a replication of one of the pieces of art that Raina had made, that he had gotten that tattooed onto himself. There's a flashback scene where she's drawing on his arm, and I thought it was going to be something like that. And then later, you know, he's wearing a sleeveless shirt or a short sleeve shirt or whatever, and she sees his tattoos and there's nothing, and so I felt like that would have been really great to suddenly realize that one of Aiden's tattoos was a drawing of Raina's. I thought that would have been really cool. But again, I don't know why it was a big deal, like why it was trying to initially hide his tattoos and then didn't care about it. So anyway, I wish that Sarah Doss would have just said, you know what, I loved Persuasion so much, and I was really inspired by Persuasion when I wrote this book. But don't call it a Persuasion retelling, because it's just too different. And I think with both of these books, you know, as I said before, our ideas about women, what women can do in the world, you know, their value, like in Jane Austen time, you know, women were expected to get married, and we no longer have that, where we're free to pursue things. I'm not saying that the women's rights movement is over or anything like that, but I mean, these two characters take very different paths, have dreams that Jane Austen's characters simply couldn't have imagined. So I would love to know if you've read Pride or Where the Rhythm Takes You, what you thought of it. Are there other retellings that I should be reading? Are there other YA retellings that you're aware of? Do you think Jane Austen should be retold? What is the value of that? So I look forward to hearing from you down in the comments section. BookTube, remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye.